So usually, an art forgery bust follows this very specific, almost cinematic script.
Right, like something straight out of a movie.
Exactly. You picture the police raiding some shadowy, climate-controlled studio, and they find this brilliant, reclusive artist painstakingly replicating the brushstrokes of a Rembrandt or a Picasso.
Yeah, mixing centuries-old pigments just to trick the fine art world into parting with millions of dollars. It's that classic high-stakes cat-and-mouse game.
But looking through our stack of sources for today, the police reports and historical analyses, you stumble across an arrest from 2006 that just completely shatters that classic setup.
Oh, really does?
Because a woman is arrested in Germany for selling these cheap, mass-produced knockoff paintings from Asia. Her crime was forging the signature on them to boost their value. But she wasn't forging Picasso or Monet. She claimed to be the grandniece of a man named Konrad Kujau, and she was forging his signature.
Which is just a masterpiece of irony. I mean, Konrad Kujau is widely considered one of the 20th century's most infamous forgers. Right. So you have someone forging the signature of a master forger on fake copies of paintings that were, already fakes in the first place.
It's just layers upon layers of fabricated reality. Someone was out there literally forging the forger. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are taking this stack of research to explore how a man whose entire life was built on disorganized lies managed to pull off one of the most audacious historical frauds of all time. We're going to trace this chronological journey of a petty thief who escalated his grift into a multi-million-mark international crisis.
And he did it simply by exploiting the world's morbid fascination with history. That 2006 arrest really perfectly encapsulates Kujau's legacy.
It sets the stage so well, and by the end of this deep dive, you are going to see how easily the highest-level experts and institutions can be blinded to physical reality when they're just desperate to believe a compelling story.
Exactly. To understand how a multi-million-mark international fraud gets built, we really have to look at the raw materials of the forger himself.
Yeah, where does a guy like this even start?
Well, the historical record points us back to 1938, to a town called Lobau in what was then Nazi Germany. This is really a masterclass in how a criminal mindset takes root. But, initially it's remarkably incompetent.
Incompetent is definitely the word. He was born into extreme poverty.
Yeah, one of 6 children to a cobbler. The family's financial situation was so dire that his mother frequently had to send the children to orphanages just to survive for stretches of time.
Wow.
But the psychological foundation here is the household ideology. Both of his parents had joined the ruling party early on, back in 1933. So Kujau grew up completely steeped in this environment, idolizing the regime and its leader.
And what's wild is that for the vast majority of the population, when the war ended in 1945 and the horrors of that regime were laid bare, that ideology was rapidly abandoned.
Right, for obvious reasons.
But Kujau is this outlier. He maintained this fervent, almost obsessive enthusiasm for that fallen regime well into his adulthood.
It became the defining lens through which he viewed the entire world. But contrasting that grandiose view of history, his actual day-to-day life was just bleak. He worked a series of menial jobs.
And his entrance into the world of crime wasn't some grand ideological crusade, was it?
Not at all. In 1957, while working as a waiter at a youth club, he abruptly fled to West Germany just to dodge an arrest warrant.
And the crime he was fleeing from? He stole a single microphone.
Just a microphone.
Just one microphone.
Yeah. He landed in Stuttgart, and that basically set the blueprint for his early adulthood. He drifted through temporary jobs and committed a string of the most disorganized, low-stakes, petty crimes on record.
We're talking really low stakes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In 1959, he was fined 80 marks for stealing tobacco. Then the following year, he spent 9 months in prison for breaking into a storeroom to steal cognac.
And by 1961, he was locked up again for stealing 5 crates of fruit. Plus, he had this incredibly volatile temper, like getting into a physical brawl with his boss while working as a cook in a bar.
He was a mess.
It's like watching a toddler try to steal a fire engine, He was loud, clumsy, and immediately caught every single time.
You really see a man desperately trying to elevate his status, trying to be something he's not, but failing on a comical level. I mean, he attempted to invent a new persona, telling people his name was Peter Fisher.
Right, he altered his birth year and everything.
Yeah, he fabricated this elaborate backstory about his time in East Germany. But he couldn't even manage the basic mechanics of a lie.
His first actual attempt at forgery highlights this perfectly. He forged lunch and vouchers. He risked his freedom for just 27 marks worth of meal tickets, got caught immediately, and spent 5 days in jail.
And the defining moment of this early incompetence happened in 1968. The police conducted a routine check at his lodgings. He gave them a name, an address, and a date of birth.
But the papers in his own pocket contradicted everything he just said.
Exactly. And rather than folding, he went down to the police station and offered a third, completely different set of details, backed by this convoluted story about why he was using a fake name.
Which didn't work at all.
No, the police simply took his fingerprints, confirmed he was Konrad Kujau, and sent him to Stamheim prison.
So as a listener, you really have to wonder, how does a man who cannot even successfully lie to a local beat cop about his own name eventually orchestrate a fraud that fools international historians?
Well, the shift happens when he moves away from general, chaotic crime and discovers targeted exploitation.
Okay, how does that start?
After his release from prison in the late 1960s, he and his partner Edith started a cleaning company. It brought in a modest income, enough to buy a flat near Stuttgart. But a fateful trip back to East Germany in 1970 to visit his family, that became the catalyst for his entire future.
Because he noticed an economic disparity that he could exploit.
Precisely. He realized that locals in East Germany still possessed a vast amount of hidden historical relics from the war.
Which were highly illegal over there.
Right. Under the communist government in the East, owning or selling those items was strictly forbidden. But across the border in the West, there was this massive, booming underground market of collectors willing to pay top dollar for them.
This is where we need to look at the cultural psychology of West Germany in the 1970s. You have a society grappling with a deeply suppressed past.
Yeah, it was a very complicated time.
Collecting these artifacts became this taboo way for some people to touch that history, to control it, or simply to indulge a secret nostalgia. And Kujau saw that he could buy these relics for pennies on the Eastern black market, smuggle them across the border, and flip them for up to 10 times the profit.
He essentially became an international smuggler, but he still retained that chaotic, volatile energy from his youth. The transition to a professional grifter wasn't smooth. We really have to look at the incident in February 1973.
Oh, the machine gun incident. It perfectly captures his erratic nature. So he was smuggling weapons out of the East, right?
Yes, and occasionally getting drunk and firing pistols in open fields or shooting empty bottles behind his local bar.
Just totally reckless.
Very. And one night, heavily intoxicated, he became convinced someone was slashing the tires on his cleaning van.
So his immediate response, naturally, was to grab a loaded machine gun, run into the street, and chase down a random man he assumed was the vandal.
Which is insane. The terrified man fled, and Kujau chased him into a doorway. But he chose the wrong doorway, burst in, and terrified a local sex worker instead.
Oh my God.
The police arrived, arrested him, and upon searching his flat, they found an entire illegal arsenal. 5 pistols, a machine gun, a shotgun, and 3 rifles.
But somehow he just paid a fine, apologized, and avoided a massive prison sentence.
It's baffling. But that brush with serious consequences seemed to force a pivot. By 1974, he rented a shop to sell his smuggled memorabilia openly.
And this is the critical juncture. He realizes that a genuine artifact has a ceiling on its value, but an artifact attached to a specific dramatic story that has almost limitless value.
He stopped merely supplying the black market and started manipulating it. For example, he would take a standard First World War helmet, which was intrinsically worth very little.
Right.
But he would forge a small note to accompany it, claiming that this specific helmet was worn by the infamous dictator himself at the Battle of Ypres in 1914.
The moment he adds that fake provenance, the price just skyrockets. And it wasn't just helmets. He started forging handwritten notes, letters, and documents attributed to high-ranking officials of the fallen regime.
Yeah.
But what defies belief is the absolute crudeness of his methodology. I mean, he was not sophisticated.
Not at all. He had zero scientific expertise. He used modern, off-the-shelf stationery. And to simulate the aging process, he literally simply wiped the paper down with wet tea bags.
Tea bags, just standard grocery store tea bags.
Yep. And for official government letterheads, he used lettersExploiting.
Wait, like those sheets of modern rub-on plastic letters you might use for a middle school science fair project.
Exactly those. And when he attempted to forge English language documents, like diplomatic agreements, his grammar was atrocious. He misspelled agreement, he misspelled signed, he even spelled again with an E at the end.
So how does any serious, wealthy collector look at a modern, tea-stained piece of paper featuring rub-on letters and glaring typos, and accept it as a genuine historical artifact. It makes no sense.
Well, this gets to the heart of the willing mark. In any confidence trick, the ideal victim is someone who actively wants the lie to be true.
Right.
Kujau was tapping into a market of wealthy individuals desperate for an exclusive connection to a dark, highly mythologized period. They were not applying scientific skepticism. Their judgment was entirely clouded by unbridled desire.
And Fritz Stiefel is the prime example of this dynamic, isn't he?
Absolutely. He was an avid collector who became Kujau's best customer. Stiefel's obsession with acquiring these items grew so intense that he began embezzling massive amounts of money, over 180,000 marks, from his own company just to fund his purchases.
Wow, just stealing from his own company to buy fake helmets and letters?
Yeah, when a buyer is that deeply compromised, both financially and emotionally, their brain constructs a defense mechanism. They literally cannot afford to see the tea stains or the typos, because acknowledging the fraud means acknowledging their own total ruin.
That makes a lot of sense. And Kujau recognized this vulnerability and just escalated his production. He started painting pictures, claiming they were the lost early works of the dictator.
But he didn't even bother mimicking the architectural landscapes the dictator actually painted.
No, he just painted whatever Stiefel and other buyers requested. Nudes, cartoons, action scenes. He would paint them, forge a quick note of authentication, and just cash these massive checks.
And because Stiefel accepted these absurdities without question, Kujau realized the market's blind spot was absolute. That psychological green light pushed him to attempt the ultimate fabrication.
He had already hand-copied both volumes of a famous, widely published ideological manifesto, which, just to pause on that, the original manifesto was a typed book, but Kujau hand-wrote the entire thing out and sold it as an original manuscript.
Which is so brazen. And when that actually worked, he decided to create the holy grail for these collectors, the personal, undiscovered diaries of the dictator.
The audacity is just staggering, especially considering his materials. For what would supposedly be the most important historical documents of the 20th century, Kujau traveled to East Berlin and purchased a stack of standard, incredibly cheap, modern notebooks.
Yeah. He affixed a generic German army wax seal to make them look official and attached a black ribbon salvaged from a genuine document.
But the most glaring physical error was the initials on the cover. He wanted to place the dictator's initials in gold lettering on the front. So he bought cheap plastic adhesive letters from a department store in Hong Kong.
Right.
But instead of an A and an H, he mistakenly applied the letters F and H. And rather than fixing it, he just left it.
He just completely doubled down on the error.
Yeah.
And for the ink, he purchased 2 bottles of modern Pelican brand fountain pen ink, one black, one blue, mixed them together, and watered the solution down so it would flow easily from a cheap modern pen. He spent exactly 1 month practicing the old German Gothic script, and then just began churning out the diaries.
But the way he introduced these diaries to the market, that is a stroke of manipulative brilliance, because he didn't just walk into his shop and offer them for sale. That would look like a quick cash grab.
Exactly. He utilized the psychology of artificial scarcity. Sometime in the late 1970s, he showed the first diary to Stiefel.
And Stiefel was mesmerized, naturally.
Of course. He immediately offered to buy it. But Kujau refused. He claimed the document was far too precious to sell. Instead, he offered to merely loan it to Stiefel.
Which is so smart. By removing the financial transaction in that moment, he erased any suspicion of a profit motive. If it's not for sale, the buyer's brain just assumes it must be authentic.
It's a classic con. To insulate the physical flaws of the diaries, Kujau constructed this elaborate fictional provenance.
The backstory.
Yeah. He told his buyers he had established a covert network in East Germany. He claimed he was bribing museum directors and receiving documents from a former general.
He even invented a non-existent brother, serving as a high-ranking officer in the East German army, supposedly smuggling these diaries out of secret, undiscovered vaults.
And once that narrative took root in the buyer's mind, the physical evidence just ceased to matter. The collectors were buying the thrilling story of the secret East German vault. They weren't looking at the plastic letters from Hong Kong.
And because the collector underground was so insular and, prone to gossip, rumors about these miraculous diaries inevitably began to leak out.
Which leads us to 1980, when this homemade, tea-stained con job collides with the high-stakes world of international journalism. Gerd Heidemann, a veteran journalist who harbored his own deep obsession with this era of history, heard the whispers and tracked Kujau down.
And Kujau spun the exact same lie to Heidemann, right? The secret archive, the brother in the East German army, and Heidemann took the bait entirely.
Hook, line and sinker. Over the next 2 years, an industrialized fraud took shape. Kujau just sat at his desk with his cheap notebooks and watered-down ink, ultimately churning out 61 volumes of these fabricated diaries.
And the financial scale of this operation really explains why the verification process broke down so spectacularly. Kujau secured 2.5 million marks for his labor.
Yes.
But Heidemann, acting as the exclusive middleman between Kujau and his employers at Stern magazine, secured over 9 million marks from the publication.
Let that sink in.
Wait, so the journalist, whose primary duty is to uncover the truth and verify sources, was actually skimming millions of marks off the top of the transaction?
Oh, yeah. Heidemann walked away with an illicit net profit of around 6.8 million marks. So he was heavily financially incentivized to ensure the diaries were accepted as genuine.
That creates a massive institutional failure at Stern magazine. I mean, the publication was so blinded by the prospect of securing the historical scoop of the century, and of course the resulting surge in circulation and syndication rights, that they basically bypassed rigorous authentication.
To protect their exclusive story, Stern isolated the verification process. They didn't subject the original notebooks to immediate forensic testing.
Right, which is what you would normally do.
Exactly. Instead, they relied on historians who were often only shown limited samples or were heavily primed by Heidemann's very compelling backstory. Stern wanted the diaries to be true just as intensely as Fritz Stiefel did.
But a secret of that magnitude, built on such flimsy materials, cannot survive the light of day. In 1983, Stern triumphantly published the diaries, and almost immediately, independent scientific and historical scrutiny tore the entire narrative to shreds.
Once actual forensic experts were allowed to examine the physical diaries, the collapse was instantaneous. Under ultraviolet light, the pages glowed brightly.
Oh, wow. Why did they glow?
This was due to a chemical whitener called blankophore, which is a substance that was only introduced into paper manufacturing after the war.
So the paper itself physically could not have existed when the dictator was alive.
Exactly. Furthermore, analysis of the ink proved it was modern, and evaporation rates showed the diaries had been written very recently. The exposure was rapid, absolute, and deeply humiliating for everyone involved.
I can imagine. So what happened to them?
The fallout culminated in a 1984 trial. Kujau was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for forgery. His partner, Edith, received a 1-year sentence as an accomplice. And Heidemann, the journalist who facilitated the fraud and skimmed the profits, was also sentenced to 4.5 years for fraud.
Think about the trajectory of that life. A man who, in his youth, couldn't successfully steal a microphone without being arrested, managed to orchestrate a multi-million-mark international crisis that humiliated one of Europe's largest magazines simply by applying modern ink to cheap paper.
It's an incredible arc, and after serving 3 years, Kujau was released from prison. And his third act is arguably the most surreal chapter of all.
Yeah, he didn't exactly hide in shame.
Not at all. He didn't retreat into obscurity or express deep remorse. He leaned entirely into his infamy.
He became a television celebrity in Germany, frequently appearing on talk shows styled as a quote-unquote forgery expert. He capitalized on his notoriety by opening a business where he overtly legally sold genuine Kujau fakes.
He would paint in the style of major historical artists, sign his own name to them, and collectors eagerly bought them because he was famous for being a fraud.
The lie itself became the valuable commodity.
Exactly. He even entered politics, running for mayor of Stuttgart in 1996.
The man who aged paper with tea bags and glued the wrong initials onto the diaries ran for mayor and actually pulled in over 900 votes. He remained a public figure right up until his death in 2000. Which brings this entire story full circle back to our opening source from 2006.
Right, his grandniece, caught selling cheap Asian copies of paintings, forging Konrad Kujau's signature on them to artificially inflate their value. She was utilizing the brand name of a man whose entire legacy was a fabrication.
When you look back at this deep dive, Kujau's wild success wasn't due to his skill as a master forger. It relied entirely on the fact that his victims wanted his fakes to be real.
They wanted to rewrite history, or they wanted to make a fortune.
Yeah, and that desire created a cognitive blind spot that obscured the obvious modern paper and the plastic letters. As you navigate today's era of deepfakes, AI generation, and just a relentless barrage of information, it leaves you with a critical question to ask yourself. What obvious tea-stained forgeries are you accepting in your own life right now simply because they confirm exactly what you already want to believe?